It was a bright morning in downtown Los Angeles. The city was alive, filled with the usual noise of car horns, music from passing speakers, and the rush of people going about their lives. At the center of the noise stood a tall glass building, shining like a mirror in the sun. Outside that building, a group of journalists and photographers waited, holding cameras and microphones. Inside, one of the most powerful men in the world was about to walk out after an important meeting that could change everything. Elon Musk had just finished a long discussion with a group of people who claimed they had built the next big thing in green technology. They talked about clean energy, about saving the planet, and about how they wanted him to partner with them. They came with promises that sounded almost perfect. Massive potential for environmental change, huge profit, and global praise. Elon had heard such proposals before, but this one seemed to catch his attention more than most. The group was persuasive, professional, and confident. He had their contract in his hand, a thick folder with numbers and graphs. The papers were heavy with importance. Outside, his car was already waiting. His assistants were walking close beside him, trying to keep the crowd under control. The cameras flashed the moment he stepped through the door. Everyone wanted a picture of him holding the folder, maybe hoping that this would be the deal of the century. Just as he reached for the car door, a voice cut through the noise. "Don't sign that paper, it's a trap." It was a voice so desperate, so raw, that everyone stopped for a split second. The security guards turned their heads sharply. Journalists stopped talking. Elon froze mid-step, his hand still on the car handle. From the corner of the crowd, a young girl pushed her way forward. Her clothes were worn out, her hair tangled, and she carried a small torn backpack. Her face was pale, and there was something about her eyes that made people look twice. They were full of fear, but also of determination. The guards immediately stepped toward her, blocking her path. "Sir, please get in the car," one of them said to Elon, trying to move him inside before things got messy. But Elon didn't move. He looked at the girl again. She wasn't yelling for attention like some protesters often did. She looked like someone who had run out of options. The girl tried to speak again, but the guards were already holding her back. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "That company, those people inside, they're not what they say they are. Please, you have to check before you sign. It's not what it looks like." The journalists were now shouting questions. Some laughed, thinking she was just another person chasing attention. The guards tried to move her away from the car, but Elon raised his hand slightly. "Wait," he said calmly. The crowd went quiet again. He walked a few steps toward her. "What are you talking about?" he asked in a low voice. She looked straight at him, her eyes watery but strong. "They're lying. They've done this before. They use people like you to make their fake company look real. You'll lose everything if you sign that deal." Before she could say more, one of the guards interrupted. "Sir, let's go. We can handle this." The girl struggled against their grip, trying to reach him, but Elon didn't respond right away. He just looked at her for a long second, thinking. Something in her voice had felt real. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't a stunt. There was a strange honesty in it, the kind that couldn't be faked. Still, with so many people watching, he finally nodded to the guards to let her go. "Make sure she's okay," he said quietly before getting into the car. As the door closed, flashes went off again, and the girl disappeared back into the crowd. Inside the car, Elon leaned back in his seat, still hearing her words echoing in his head. "Don't sign that paper, it's a trap." His assistant sitting beside him tried to brush it off. "Sir, these things happen all the time. There are always people shouting wild things. She's probably just someone looking for help." Elon nodded slowly, but he didn't reply. He looked down at the folder in his hand. The company had a spotless presentation. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect, maybe. When he reached his office later that afternoon, he placed the folder on his desk but didn't open it. He poured himself a glass of water, sat down, and stared out the window for a while. The city stretched endlessly below him, lights starting to glow as evening approached. He had met countless people in his career: investors, dreamers, inventors, con artists. Over the years, he had learned to read people. And that girl, she didn't look like someone chasing fame. She looked like someone trying to stop a disaster. Finally, he picked up the phone and called his assistant. "Can you find out who that girl was?" he asked. His assistant hesitated. "The one from earlier? The homeless one?" "Yes," Elon said. "See if you can get her name or anything about her." The search wasn't easy. The girl had no ID, no address, and no social media accounts. For hours, the team couldn't find anything. But one security guard remembered she had dropped a small notebook when they stopped her. Inside it were a few pages filled with messy handwriting, some sketches of computer diagrams, and a name scribbled on the inside cover: Lena. That night, Elon couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the notebook, about the way she had spoken, and about the strange fear in her eyes. The next morning, he asked his assistant to dig deeper. By the afternoon, they had finally found something. Lena had once been a college student studying computer science at a well-known university. She had worked on a small startup that focused on environmental data systems. The company had shut down 2 years ago after an internal data breach and a mysterious buyout. Since then, she had vanished from any official records. Some said she had lost her home after the company collapsed. Elon sat silently for a long moment staring at the screen. Then he looked at the name of the company that had bought her failed startup. His eyes narrowed when he saw it. It was the same name as the green tech group that had approached him for the new partnership. He leaned back in his chair. "This can't be a coincidence," he said under his breath. Later that evening, he asked his team to postpone signing any papers with the company until further notice. The representatives of the group were surprised when they heard the delay. They tried to push for a quick meeting, but Elon refused, saying he needed time to review. He then asked his assistant to try to find Lena again, but this time to bring her somewhere safe. 2 days passed before they found her. She was sitting near an old bookstore downtown, eating from a small paper bag. When his assistant approached her, she looked startled, clutching her backpack tightly. But when he told her Elon wanted to meet her, she froze in disbelief. "He wants to meet me?" she asked quietly, almost not believing it. "Yes," the assistant said. "He just wants to talk." She hesitated. "He didn't sign, did he?" "No," the assistant said. "He didn't." That night she was brought to a quiet cafe far from the cameras and noise. Elon arrived soon after, without his usual security team or press. He walked in, dressed simply, carrying a small notebook. When he saw her sitting at the corner table, he walked over slowly. "You stopped me from signing," he said, taking a seat. "Now tell me why." For a moment she didn't speak. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her old backpack and pulled out a cracked laptop. She placed it gently on the table as if it was something precious. "Because I built part of their system," she said softly. "And I know what they're doing with it." He didn't interrupt. He just listened. She explained how her small team had developed a program that could analyze environmental data from factories and power plants. They had dreamed it would help reduce pollution and make industries more transparent. But before they could release it, a group of investors came in, offering to buy the technology. At first they thought it was a good thing. Then one by one, her team members quit or disappeared from contact. The company shut down without explanation, and she lost everything: her job, her apartment, even her savings. Months later, she discovered that the same investors had started a new company, the same one that now stood in front of Elon, pretending to be a clean energy pioneer. She had found enough evidence to prove they were using the software not to monitor pollution, but to manipulate environmental data for profit. As she spoke, Elon felt a chill. Every word she said matched small things he had noticed but ignored. The too perfect graphs, the vague answers, the hurried pressure to sign. When she finished talking, she looked at him with tired eyes. "I didn't know what else to do," she said. "I tried to warn people, but no one believed me. When I saw your name attached to them, I knew they were going to use your reputation to cover their lies." Elon didn't speak for a while. The cafe was almost empty, the sound of light music filling the silence between them. Finally, he said quietly, "You did the right thing." She looked down. "I wasn't sure you'd listen." "I almost didn't," he admitted. "But something about you told me I should." She smiled faintly, but her eyes were still full of sadness. "I don't need anything from you," she said. "I just didn't want them to get away with it again." Elon nodded slowly. "You won't have to worry about that." When she left that night, he watched her disappear into the quiet streets, her small backpack hanging loosely on her shoulder. He knew she was telling the truth. And he also knew that if she hadn't shown up that day, standing in front of 100 cameras shouting those words, he might have signed a deal that would... The next morning came with a heavy sky. Clouds hung low over Los Angeles, as if the city itself was waiting for something to happen. Elon sat quietly in his office, staring at the folder he had once been ready to sign without hesitation. Now it felt different in his hands, heavier, darker, full of questions. He turned the pages again and again, reading between the lines, trying to see what he had missed before. His assistant stepped in holding a cup of coffee and a small tablet. "Sir," he said softly, "I've gathered the names of the people behind the company. Everything looks clean on paper. But there are gaps. Companies that don't exist anymore, addresses that lead nowhere. It's unusual." Elon didn't look surprised. "I want you to dig deeper," he said. "Not the surface. I want to know who's really behind it." The assistant nodded and left, closing the door quietly. Elon leaned back, rubbing his forehead. The girl's face, Lena's, kept flashing in his mind. Her voice still echoed that moment outside the building when she had shouted those words. He couldn't shake the thought of how close he had come to walking into a trap. He wasn't used to being fooled, but this one had been planned well. Too well. He opened his laptop and began looking into the company's early activities himself. At first glance, everything was legitimate. Strong branding, beautiful website, even fake testimonials from supposed partners. But when he searched deeper, he started finding patterns. The names of small shell companies appeared repeatedly, each lasting only a few months before disappearing. A few of them were connected to the same financial accounts. It was a web of clean facades hiding something bigger. Hours passed before he even realized it was dark outside. The lights from the street reflected against the glass of his office window. He finally stood up, stretched, and walked toward the elevator. On the ride down, he was silent, lost in thought. That night, he drove alone through the city. His car moved through wet streets that glistened under the streetlights. He wasn't sure why, but he ended up driving near the same cafe where he had met Lena 2 nights before. He parked across the street and looked through the window. She wasn't there. Part of him had hoped she might be, just sitting there with that broken laptop working quietly. He sighed, leaning back in his seat. For someone with so much power and knowledge, it was strange how helpless he felt in that moment. She had risked everything to warn him, yet he still didn't know how to help her or where she'd go next. The next day started early. His assistant had already gathered more information. "You were right," he said, placing a file on the desk. "The company's main shareholders are fake. Their listed offices are rented fronts, and guess what? One of the shell companies they used was registered under the same ID as the firm that bought Lena's old startup." Elon flipped through the documents quickly, his eyes sharp. "So she was telling the truth," he said quietly. "Yes. Every part of it." Elon paused for a moment, thinking. Then he looked up. "Get in touch with a few trusted people from our internal security and audit team. Tell them to investigate this discreetly. I want every document, every connection, every message they've ever sent. By noon, the quiet investigation began. Meanwhile, far away in a small shelter on the east side of the city, Lena sat on a narrow bed holding her old laptop close. The meeting with Elon had left her shaken but hopeful. For the first time in years, someone had actually listened to her. She didn't know what he would do next, but she hoped he believed her. She looked out the small window at the busy street below, whispering to herself, "Please don't sign it." Back at Elon's headquarters, the investigation team was uncovering more and more disturbing details. The so-called green tech company had built its image using stolen patents and recycled data from other projects. They had also made large untraceable transfers to private accounts overseas. It was a massive fraud operation disguised as environmental innovation. One of Elon's analysts walked into his office that afternoon looking pale. "Sir, we found something else. They've already sent out press releases about your upcoming partnership. The media thinks you've agreed to sign tomorrow." Elon frowned. "Tomorrow?" "Yes, they're trying to create pressure. Once the public believes it's done, it'll be harder to back out." Elon stood up immediately. "Call a press conference," he said. "Tomorrow morning." The analyst hesitated. "Sir, should we cancel the deal quietly first?" "No," Elon said firmly. "We do it publicly. If we stay quiet, they'll spin the story their way. I want the truth out in the open." That night, he barely slept. He stayed up reviewing every file his team uncovered, making sure every claim could be backed up with proof. The more he read, the angrier he became. These people weren't just trying to use his name. They were planning to manipulate investors, governments, and the public under the mask of clean energy. Around midnight, he sent a message to his assistant. "Find Lena. Tell her I need her there tomorrow." When morning came, the sun was hidden behind thick clouds. The press conference was set inside a large auditorium filled with reporters, cameras, and flashing lights. Everyone expected Elon to announce his new partnership. The fraud company's representatives were already seated in the front row, wearing confident smiles. But there was one thing they didn't expect. At the back of the room, quietly sitting near the exit, was Lena. She wore a simple gray jacket, her hair tied back neatly. One of Elon's assistants had picked her up early that morning and brought her in through a side entrance. She had no idea what was going to happen, only that he had said, "Trust me." When Elon walked onto the stage, the room filled with applause. The cameras zoomed in. Reporters stood up, ready to capture what they thought was another big success story. He walked to the podium, adjusting the microphone. He waited for the noise to settle, then said, "Thank you for being here. Today I was expected to sign a deal with a company that claims to be revolutionizing green technology." He paused, glancing at the front row where the company's representatives sat proudly. "But before I do anything, I believe in something more important than business, truth." The room went quiet. Reporters exchanged glances. The men in the front row stiffened slightly. Elon continued, "2 days ago I met someone by accident, a young woman who tried to stop me from making a huge mistake. At first I didn't understand why. But when I listened, I found out that what she said was true. The deal I was about to sign was not about saving the planet. It was about stealing from it." Gasps spread through the audience. The cameras flashed wildly. He turned to the large screen behind him and nodded to his assistant. Slides appeared showing proof: fake company registrations, money trails, stolen patents. "This company built its reputation on lies," Elon said firmly. "They tried to use my name to make their fraud look real. But thanks to one person's courage, the truth came out before it was too late." The crowd was stunned. Reporters started shouting questions. The company's representatives stood frozen, their confident smiles gone. Some of them tried to interrupt, but Elon didn't stop. He looked toward the back of the room where Lena sat silently. For a moment, their eyes met. "That person," he said, "was a girl who had nothing, no home, no money, no reason to risk herself. But she did. She spoke up when no one else would. And because of her, the world won't fall for another lie." Every camera in the room turned toward her. She lowered her head, embarrassed, but people started clapping. The sound grew louder until the entire hall was filled with applause. Some reporters even stood up, applauding her bravery. The company's representatives tried to leave quietly, but security stopped them. They were escorted out as reporters surrounded Elon, asking for statements. The press conference made headlines everywhere. "Homeless girl saves Elon Musk from a billion-dollar scam," appeared on every news site within hours. People around the world began talking about Lena's courage. Later that evening, Elon met her again in a quiet room behind the stage. She looked overwhelmed, her eyes filled with disbelief. "I didn't mean for all this," she said softly. "I just didn't want them to hurt anyone else." He smiled gently. "Sometimes the smallest act of truth changes everything," he said. "You didn't just save me. You stopped them from deceiving thousands." She shook her head. "I don't want attention. I just want to start over." He nodded. "You will. I'll make sure of it." Outside the building, the evening air was cool. Reporters were still gathered, waiting for comments. Elon walked out first, answering a few questions before heading to his car. Lena stood behind the glass doors, watching. She didn't know what her future would be, but for the first time in years, she felt hope. As the car drove away, Elon looked out the window. The city lights shimmered like stars on the wet pavement. He thought about how strange life could be, how a random encounter on a crowded street could change everything. He had learned something valuable that day. Power and success might give a person strength, but it was still the courage of ordinary people that truly made a difference. That night, as he sat in his quiet home office, he opened his notebook and wrote one simple sentence: "Never underestimate the voice of someone who dares to tell the truth." He closed the notebook slowly, thinking of Lena, and the moment she had stepped out of the crowd to shout those words. He smiled faintly, knowing this was only the beginning of her story, and in some way his too. The morning sun rose slowly over Los Angeles, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink. The city was already alive. Traffic buzzing, people rushing to work, news vans parked outside the building where the big press conference was about to happen. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Elon stood by the tall glass window, quietly watching the growing crowd outside. His reflection looked calm, but his mind was running faster than ever. He had spent the past few nights barely sleeping. The evidence Lena had shown him kept replaying in his head. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that fake contract, the hidden files in her trembling hands as she explained what she had discovered. He couldn't stop thinking about how close he had come to signing something that could have destroyed everything he'd built. Now, it was time to face the world and tell the truth. His advisors were nervous. They wanted him to handle things quietly, to cancel the deal without making a scene. But Elon refused. "If I stay silent," he said earlier that morning, "it will happen to someone else. I can't just walk away." In a small waiting room nearby, Lena sat nervously, clutching the strap of an old bag. She wore a plain white shirt and a jacket that was slightly too big for her, borrowed from one of Elon's assistants. Her hair was tied back neatly, though a few strands fell loose around her face. She looked both anxious and strong at the same time. When Elon walked in, she stood up quickly, unsure of what to say. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. Lena nodded, though her voice trembled a little. "I don't know if I should be there," she said. "This isn't my world." Elon gave her a calm smile. "It wasn't mine once either," he said. "But truth doesn't belong to a world. It belongs to people who have the courage to tell it." She didn't respond right away, but something in his voice made her straighten her shoulders. She realized he wasn't just going to expose the fraud. He was also giving her a chance to be seen, to reclaim her dignity after everything she had lost. The conference hall was filled with reporters, investors, and photographers. The noise of voices blended into a steady hum until the large lights switched on and the cameras focused on the stage. Everyone expected a celebration. The green tech partnership had been heavily advertised, and many thought this would be a major breakthrough moment for the industry. Elon walked onto the stage, his expression serious. The room went quiet immediately. He thanked the audience, adjusted the microphone slightly, and began speaking in a calm but firm tone. "Thank you all for being here today," he said. "I know many of you came expecting a signing ceremony, but I believe it's more important to talk about something else, something that needs to be said even if it's uncomfortable." Whispers spread across the room. The investors sitting in the front rows exchanged uneasy glances. Elon continued, "A few weeks ago, I was approached by a group claiming to have developed a revolutionary technology that could change the future of clean energy. They presented impressive data reports and projections. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. I was ready to sign a major partnership deal with them, until something unexpected happened." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Someone stopped me. Someone who had nothing to gain and everything to lose." At that moment, the large screen behind him lit up with a still image. A blurry photo of the night outside the charity event, where a young homeless girl had run through the crowd shouting for him not to sign. The room erupted in murmurs. Elon looked toward the side of the stage. "That person is here today," he said. "Her name is Lena." All eyes turned as Lena slowly walked up to the stage. The flash of cameras almost blinded her, and for a second she froze. But when Elon gave her an encouraging nod, she found her courage. She stepped to the microphone, her hands shaking slightly as she began to speak. "I used to work in tech," she said softly. "I was part of a small company that developed software for environmental systems. We believed we were doing something good, something that would make a difference. But one day our company was bought by a bigger group. They promised to take our ideas further. I didn't know back then what they were really doing." She took a deep breath and continued. "Months later, I found hidden files, records showing that the data had been faked. They were using false numbers to attract investors and to sell fake sustainability credits. I tried to report it, but they shut everything down. They took everything I had, including my home. I ended up on the streets, but I kept one old laptop. That's where the truth stayed." The hall was completely silent now. Even the camera clicks had stopped. Lena's voice grew steadier. "When I saw Elon Musk's name on the news, I realized they were trying to use him too. That night I didn't think anyone would believe me. But I couldn't stay silent, so I ran. I just shouted what I knew, hoping he'd listen." Elon turned to her with a look of quiet admiration. "And I did," he said simply. He then showed documents and screenshots on the screen, proof gathered by his own investigation. They revealed fake environmental reports, false signatures, and private communications among executives planning to exploit Musk's reputation for credibility. The evidence was overwhelming. Gasps filled the hall. Reporters scribbled notes furiously while cameras flashed nonstop. The representatives of the so-called Green Company shifted uncomfortably, their faces pale. Elon looked directly at them. "I believe in innovation," he said, his voice steady. "But innovation built on lies destroys the future instead of saving it. This was not a clean energy project, it was a clean image project. And it almost worked." He took a pause and then added, "The only reason it didn't was because one person, with no home, no wealth, and no position, had the courage to speak the truth." The audience erupted into applause. It wasn't the polite kind of clapping, it was loud, emotional, real. Some people stood up, moved by what they had just witnessed. Lena stood still, almost in disbelief. For so long, she had been invisible to the world, walking the streets while people passed her by. Now hundreds of eyes were looking at her not with pity, but with respect. After the conference, the story spread everywhere. News outlets ran headlines like "Homeless Girl Exposes Billion-Dollar Fraud" and "The Whistleblower Who Saved Elon Musk." Her face appeared on every major network, her name trending online. Interviews were requested from around the world, but she turned most of them down. She wasn't chasing fame. She just wanted her life back. Still, the sudden attention changed everything. Strangers sent messages of support. People offered help, clothes, even apartments. For the first time in a long while, Lena felt seen, not as someone broken, but as someone brave. Later that evening, Elon found her sitting quietly in his office. The day had been overwhelming, but she looked peaceful, almost relieved. He sat across from her and said, "You did something incredible today." She smiled faintly. "I just told the truth," she said. "That's the hardest thing to do," Elon replied. "Most people stay silent when it matters the most." There was a long pause. Lena stared out the window at the glowing city lights. "You know," she said softly, "when I was on the streets, I used to sit near bus stops just to listen to people talk. I missed conversations, laughter, the feeling of being part of the world. I thought I'd lost it forever." Elon looked at her thoughtfully. "You're part of it again," he said. "And this time the world is listening to you." She nodded, though her eyes glistened with tears. For her, this wasn't just about uncovering fraud. It was about finding herself again, reclaiming a voice that life had tried to silence. In the following days, the investigation deepened. Authorities launched official actions against the fraudulent company, freezing their accounts and arresting several executives involved. Elon publicly thanked Lena, calling her a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. A few weeks later, he arranged a small event, not for the media, but for his employees and partners. During his talk, he mentioned how easy it is for people to overlook those who seem powerless. "Great ideas," he said, "can come from anywhere. And courage can live in anyone, no matter where they come from." Lena was sitting quietly at the back, not expecting him to mention her. But when he looked in her direction, everyone turned and applauded again. She blushed, lowering her head, still not used to the attention. After the event, Elon's assistant approached her with an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and a simple offer letter. It was an internship position at one of his data research programs, with full support for further education. Lena's hands trembled as she read it. She couldn't speak for a moment, then looked up with disbelief. "Why me?" she asked quietly. Elon smiled. "Because you already passed the hardest test," he said. "You stood up for what's right even when no one was standing with you." That night, Lena sat by her small apartment window, the city lights flickering outside. She thought about the journey, from sleeping under bridges and being ignored, to standing on a stage beside one of the world's most powerful people. It didn't feel real, but it was. She didn't see herself as a hero. She was just someone who refused to let fear win, and that perhaps was what made her story so powerful. As she watched the quiet night sky, she whispered to herself, "Maybe this is the start of something new." And it was. The morning light spilled softly across the city, painting the buildings in gold and pink. Lena woke up in her new apartment, and for a moment she just lay there staring at the ceiling. It had been months since she had anything that felt normal. Months since she had known safety, comfort, or the ability to plan for the future. Now her small space was neat, warm, and hers. No one was waiting outside to tell her she didn't belong. She had a place in the world again. She got up, making herself a cup of tea, and looked out the window at the streets below. The city was moving, alive, indifferent in its rhythm, but she felt connected to it now. She had found a new rhythm, too. One that came from courage, truth, and the belief that she could still matter. Today was different, though. Today, she was going back to Tesla's headquarters for the first time since the press conference and the public attention. She wasn't nervous about her work. She had spent the past months diving into data systems, tracking environmental patterns, and building models that could actually make a difference. But she was nervous about facing people again, about the spotlight that seemed to follow her wherever she went. When she arrived at the towering glass building, Elon was already waiting for her in the lobby. His presence wasn't intimidating anymore. Over the months, they had grown to understand each other, not as boss and employee, but as two people connected by a strange, life-changing moment of trust. "You're early," Elon said with a slight smile. "I don't like being late," she replied, returning a small smile. He gestured toward the elevators. "Good, we have a lot to do today." She nodded, feeling a strange mix of excitement and calm. It was no longer about fear or survival, it was about purpose. The office was alive with activity. Engineers were testing prototypes. Programmers were typing furiously at their computers, and data analysts were poring over screens filled with complex charts. Lena walked past it all, feeling a sense of belonging she hadn't known in years. This was her world now, one built on knowledge, courage, and real work that mattered. Elon led her to a small conference room, where a few senior engineers and project managers were waiting. "Lena," he began, "this is your team. We're starting a new initiative today. Real-time environmental monitoring systems across multiple cities. Your experience is vital, and I want you to take the lead." Her stomach tightened, not from fear but from anticipation. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. "I won't let you down," she said quietly. "I know you won't," he replied. "But this isn't just about work. It's about making sure what happened before never happens again. People who try to manipulate data, mislead investors, and harm the planet will be stopped if we do our job right." Over the next few days, Lena worked tirelessly. She trained the team on the software system she had once created and improved them with the new resources she now had. For hours, she typed code, analyzed patterns, and solved problems that had once seemed impossible. But unlike before, she wasn't doing it alone. She had a team, support, and the reassurance that her work would make a real difference. Elon would visit frequently, sometimes bringing coffee, sometimes just walking quietly behind her as she worked. "You've got a good rhythm," he'd say occasionally. "Keep going. The world needs this." At first, Lena didn't pay much attention to the attention she was receiving outside the office. News outlets had slowed down their coverage, though articles about her courage and work still appeared occasionally. She didn't care about fame. She cared about building something that could help people, and that focus kept her grounded. One afternoon, as she walked home, a young woman approached her in the street. "Excuse me," the woman said, holding out her phone. "Are you Lena? I just want to say thank you. Your courage inspired me to speak up at my own workplace. You don't know how much that means." Lena blinked, a little embarrassed. "Thank you," she said softly. She wasn't used to people expressing admiration. Most of the time, she had been ignored. "Can I take a picture?" the woman asked eagerly. Lena shook her head with a gentle smile. "No, I'd rather not. But thank you for saying that." It was small moments like this that began to build her confidence in the world again. She realized that her actions, though frightening at the time, had ripple effects far beyond what she could see. Weeks passed, and Lena's project started gaining attention for its practical applications. City governments began requesting the software, seeing the value in its accuracy and transparency. Researchers wanted to collaborate. Even environmental organizations that had once doubted her work now reached out to learn more. But the real reward came quietly. One evening, after a long day of work, she sat alone in the lab, reviewing the data from several sensors. Elon walked in, holding a cup of tea and a small folder. "You've done incredible work," he said. "I've been reviewing your latest models. They're better than anything we imagined." Lena looked up, her tired eyes lighting briefly. "Thank you," she said. He handed her the folder. "There's more. I've been talking to investors and research institutions. They want to fund a full-scale rollout of your system across multiple cities. Her mouth went dry. Across multiple cities? Yes, Elon said, smiling. Your work will help real people in real places. It's exactly what you hoped for, isn't it? Lena nodded slowly. She felt a swell of pride, but also humility. This wasn't about fame. This was about the chance to make the world better. The very thing she had wanted before she had lost everything. A few days later, she received a call from the office. Elon wanted her to join a video call with several government officials from different countries. They were interested in implementing her system for environmental monitoring in their cities. Lena prepared carefully, reviewing the models, checking the data, and practicing her explanations. The day of the call, she was nervous, but not for herself. She was nervous because she knew how important this was. People's lives, the environment, and the trust of cities depended on her accuracy and clarity. The call went perfectly. Officials asked questions, she explained clearly, and her calm demeanor impressed everyone. By the end, they agreed to move forward with a pilot program. Lena hung up the call and leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Elon walked in moments later, clapping softly. You were incredible, he said. I just did my job, she replied, smiling faintly. You did more than that, he said. You reminded the world that honesty and courage matter, that the right thing can still win. Her thoughts drifted back to that day outside the charity event when she had shouted, Don't sign it. It's a trap. She had no plan, no protection, no way of knowing if anyone would listen. And yet here she was, months later, leading a project that could change thousands of lives. The transformation was remarkable, not just for her, but for everyone around her. Her colleagues respected her insights, her team trusted her instincts, and Elon often spoke of her as an example of how courage and integrity could never be ignored. Even in her personal life, things began to stabilize. She found a small network of friends who understood her journey, who listened without judgment, and who supported her ambitions. She was learning to trust again, not just in people, but in herself. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lena stood on the balcony of her apartment sipping tea. The city spread out below her, alive, humming, indifferent, and perfect in its chaos. She thought about the journey, the fear, the nights sleeping on the street, the moment she shouted at Elon Musk, and the months of rebuilding that followed. It all felt surreal, like a dream she wasn't sure she deserved. But the city, the lights, the people, the work she had done, they were real, and she had earned every bit of it. A message buzzed on her phone. It was from Elon. Your courage changed everything. Keep building. The world is listening. She smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in years, she felt at home, not just in a place, but in her own life. Months later, Lena walked into Tesla's headquarters not as a visitor or a temporary intern, but as a respected analyst and project lead. People greeted her by name. Her work was recognized. She had a voice in every meeting, a say in every decision. She wasn't invisible anymore. She had influence, respect, and a purpose that went beyond herself. And still, she remained humble. Every time she looked at the software she had built, the systems she had designed, she thought about the moment it all began. Not with awards, not with recognition, but with a simple decision to speak the truth when no one else would. Elon often mentioned that moment in his conversations, saying, "A single act of honesty and courage can change the course of history." Lena thought about that and realized he was right. Her life had been almost ruined by greed and deception, yet it had been saved by truth and bravery. And in saving her, she had also saved countless others, from misinformation, fraud, and lies. Continue generating.